Everybody, welcome back into the Phillip Jordan Show. I am Phillip Jordan from Last Word in College Football, and joining me as he does every Thursday. This is our final weekly installment of this. Matt Lowe from lowdownsports.com, where he's the owner of that website, and also you can check out some of his work over at Field Level Media. Matt, it's been a long season. It's been a fun season. We are here. It is conference championship weekend coming up. The season has really blown by fast this year.
Yeah, it has. And, it's like we've talked about the last couple of weeks. We were trying to cement teams down to be in the playoff. And these last 2 weeks, we've seen a lot of surprises. So don't think for a minute that this thing's settled yet. I mean, there's always things that happen that we can't predict. And it's like we've talked about before, the pressure on these teams. It's really, really going to be big on some of them this weekend. So we'll see how they handle it.
Yeah, I mean, look at last week. I believe both of us picked Clemson to beat South Carolina. We saw how that one went. We didn't give Texas A&M any shot against LSU. So I mean, you just never know with these things.
No, and LSU, they got whipped. I
Hmm.
mean, that was with all of what they had on the line. That was surprising. It really
It
was.
was.
And I thought South Carolina would keep the game with Clemson semi close. I mean, I just really haven't been impressed with Clemson, this year, and they just don't look like the same team that they were a few years back. But yeah, the LSU one really, really shocked me.
I feel like Clemson is being held back by the quarterback position.
Yeah, and their defense doesn't look as good as it was under Brent Venables. I mean, that's
Mhm.
you talking about one of the better defensive play callers in America. So it's like I've said before, when your valuable coaching members start getting plucked from the staff, the continuity there it gets disrupted, and I think that's some of what's going on with Clemson right now.
Yeah, it is, and we'll see. We are going to not only do the SEC on this episode, we will do the big, not all the conference championship games. I'll admit to everybody, not all of them will be on there, but all the ones involved ranked teams, and we will pick the Sun Belt. Hey, look, me and Matt both from State Alabama. We do have one team in FBS in this state that's playing this weekend. But before we jump in all that, as we do every Thursday, Matt comes on, which I did a little bit of it last night. Here on the show, but I'm going to get your thoughts, Matt. The latest college football playoff rankings have been released. They were released on Tuesday night. Of course, we record this thing every Wednesday. Let me get the rankings to throw them up there for everybody. Uh, there we go. There you go. Of course, you've got Georgia, Michigan, TCU, and USC. We all thought those were going to be the top four. I think nobody surprised there. There was a discussion. I think a lot of people were wondering, would Ohio State go all the way to 5, or would Alabama jump them? But that didn't. Ohio State 5, Alabama 6, and you have Tennessee at 7, Penn State at 8, Clemson at 9, and Kansas State at 10. Matt, when you look at that, just what kind of jumps out to you?
Well, look, Ohio State being at 5 is a little surprising to me just because of the way they got beat at home. And we talked about this last week, Phillip, with Michigan and that offensive line. They took control in the second half of that game. Those boys on that Michigan offensive line, that group's for real.
Mhm.
Me personally, I would have Alabama ahead of Ohio State because Alabama's 2 losses were combined 4 points on the road in hostile environments against pretty good teams. I mean,
Mhm.
playing in Baton Rouge at night is not easy. And they lost to Tennessee, and Tennessee was hitting on all cylinders, and so I think Alabama's a better team than Ohio State. That's just my opinion. I don't know why Clemson is even in the top 10. That's a little surprising to me. But that Kansas State team, they're at number 10. TCU better be ready to play this weekend because those guys are dangerous. And every time I've picked them this year to win, they've lost. And every time I've picked them to lose, they've won. So, but Adrian Martinez and Deuce Vaughn, if y'all get a chance to watch that kid, he's a special running back, just a spitting image of Darren Sproles. So that I think TCU is going to be in for a dogfight this weekend. And boy, if USC and TCU happen to lose, this thing's going to get wild.
So, and I was talking to somebody last night. You got Tennessee at 7. I think there is a reasonable reason why they should be a little bit upset because they have the same record as Alabama and they're behind them. Now, I say that and I will say this. Like you said, Alabama's 2 losses combined 4 points. 1 point to LSU, 3 to Tennessee. Like I said, Tennessee did beat them, but Tennessee's 2 losses were by double digits. Obviously, the two touchdown defeat to Georgia, and then the 63-38 loss to South Carolina. And you don't now have Hendon Hooker. That's another thing. If you were a Tennessee person, would you be upset by that? Would you think, hey, we beat Alabama. Why are they ranked ahead of us?
I mean, maybe, but look, Tennessee, they were in control of their own destiny. They had control of that, and they got boat raced by South Carolina, which I think everybody was stunned by that. So I don't know how they could be upset. Alabama didn't lose by 30 points to somebody.
Mm-mm.
I mean, and when it's like I said, SEC went on the road. Just ask LSU last weekend. I mean, to a team that what's their record right now? 5-7.
Yeah,
A&M's.
yeah,
I
5-7.
mean, and I was stunned by that. I mean, like LSU had everything to play for. You're playing for a national. You could potentially be playing for a national championship, and just to lay an egg like that was really surprising to me. But it's just hard to win on the road anywhere, but in the SEC at night, it's extremely tough. So I mean, I think Tennessee, they've had a great year, but I don't think they have anything to complain about. And like I said, I think the top 6 are probably where they should be, but Ohio State losing at home the way they did, I'd have Alabama at 5.
And you talk about, we'll pick them, so we're not going to like give our outright prediction here. But just like you said, if USC and TCU lose, and look, not going to pick it yet, but they're very, very capable of losing these games because Utah beat USC early in the year, 43-42, I think was the score. I know it was a close game. I think Utah went for a 2-point conversion at the end to
Yes.
win it.
Yeah.
And then Kansas State can beat TCU. And when they played earlier in the year, Adrian Martinez got hurt very early in the game. He only threw 2 passes the entire game. So that was another thing in that one. So we know those 2 teams can get beat. So, going into this season, everybody was worried that the SEC and the Big Ten were about to take over. So let's just say we'll leave 1 and 2 how they are. If that happened and Alabama and Ohio State jumped in, Matt, we basically have the SEC Big Ten playoff.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be entertaining, and I think sometimes too, I hate to say this, but a lot of this comes down to money.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, don't think for a minute that sitting in that room, whoever's Big Ten representative in that room, that Ohio State is money making. So and just like Alabama, I mean, everywhere they go, they're going to bring a lot of people, and that does matter. So. But look, I will say this: it's good to see some new blood.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it really is, and I think Michigan, I think they've taken a next step. As far as their program is concerned. I mean, everybody was wanting to run Harbaugh off there for a little bit, and now, last year they got close. I think this year I think they're a better team this year. And I just think that the X factor was with them as their offensive line,
Oh, yeah.
in my opinion. And if you have a good offensive line, you can win games. I mean, and that's one thing. If they get in and they play somebody like Georgia, that'll be a very intriguing matchup to see how their offensive line matches up with Georgia's D line. But yeah, I mean, you talking. They could beat USC. USC had a big lead in that game, though, and they kind of let it slip away. But like I said, I mean, that's one of the toughest places to play in the country at night. And Utah came back. It's just hard to win. It's like college basketball, like anything else. It's just hard to win on another team's home field, especially a good team.
Yeah, it is. It is. And so we'll see how that happens. And like I said, we're going to give some outright picks on those as well, just as the SEC championship game. And before we get into breaking down the SEC championship game, Matt, of course, when we did this last week, of course, we did this, the show dropped on a Wednesday because of Thanksgiving. Me and you, we read the news. It just looked like it was going to be Lane Kiffin was going to be the next Auburn head coach. That did not pan out for whatever reason. There's many of them out there. If you look at the internet, everybody's got a reason why that did not work out. Lane Kiffin has now signed an extension with Ole Miss. So now Auburn goes another direction. They go with Hugh Freeze. I've talked about this a lot this week on the show, multiple people. Just what's your thoughts when you hear Auburn hiring Hugh Freeze as their next head football coach?
I think it's a good fit, and there's been a lot of talk about what he's done in the past and all this stuff. But look, man, we all make mistakes. We're all human. Uh, Whatever happened, with him and his personal life, I'm a person when I'm talking sports and stuff, I like to keep that stuff over there. That's between Hugh Freeze and his wife. And that's nobody else's business but theirs. I mean, we all have problems. Heck, I mean, me and my wife almost separated at one point, but we got over some things and we moved on. I mean, it's just the way things go. I mean, and people make mistakes. Nobody's perfect. To the football side of things, though, I think this is a good fit. And I will say that Lane Kiffin, maybe he was Auburn's number one target, but he has a daughter who's a senior in high school. His son likes Oxford and has friends there. Those kind of things play into decisions. I mean, who wants to uproot their kid in their senior year of high school? I mean, that kind of stuff comes into play. And, I think Hugh, I liked what he said, yesterday, Monday at the press conference. I think the guy's a bright offensive coach. I liked how he retained Cadillac Williams. That was his first move. I think that was a given, and the guy's a good recruiter. He's a good offensive play caller. And he's had success in the SEC when he's been in the league. So I think it's a good fit. And Hugh's family, his one of his daughters is living in Auburn. So I think that's a good thing as far as continuity. I don't think he's going to want to get to Auburn and go somewhere else in 3 years if he has success. So I just think it's a really good fit.
Yeah, I do too. And like you said, a lot of people want to pay attention to the negative or what has happened in the past. But when you look at, like you said, on the field, what he is as a head coach, and I mean, he's won everywhere he's went. I mean, to do what he did at Liberty was pretty good. He won 8 games every year he was there, and he had a 10-1 season in 2020. And then, of course, what did Ole Miss? Of course, beating Nick Saban twice does, that helps. He was on with Paul Feinbaum the day they introduced him. And he said, Coach, you've got 2 wins against Alabama, but in a couple of years, if you still only have 2 wins, you may not have this job too much longer. But, Hugh Freeze is, and that's another thing, too. A lot of coaches may run away from that. He had said, hey, you take this job, that's a part of it. You've got to beat in Alabama, and you've got a guy that's obviously not going to back down from Nick Saban and crew. And you got a guy, what I like, too, and it's big for Auburn. We all know Brian Harsin wasn't big on recruiting. I mean, you've heard stories that he was not doing, we've talked about this on this show week in, week out, that Brian Harsin was not doing recruiting stuff. I think Gus kind of got lax on that toward the end. And Hugh Freeze talked about already recruiting. So, but I do think, and then get your thoughts and we'll move on to the SEC Championship game. The transfer portal is going to be big. And that was why I was always saying Lane Kiffin would be a big hire for Auburn, because we know what he can do in the transfer portal. I don't know that Hugh Freeze can do that. He can. We just don't know, but he did mention that a lot in his press conference. So that's going to be huge. The transfer portal, which on Monday, that's when that thing is, opening up and everything's going to be going down with the portal. That's going to be huge to rebuild this roster, is the portal, I think.
Yeah, I think initially, sure. And like you said, with recruiting, I mean, I know a couple of guys that coach ball in high school, and they haven't seen Auburn coaches, and they're at pretty big time schools. So that's a problem. I think Hugh is a good recruiter. I mean, hell, you just said it. He won at least 8 games at Liberty. And I'd never heard of Liberty until he got there. And I mean, he took Malik Willis, and made him a 3rd round draft pick. I mean, the guy's he's a great quarterbacks coach, and he can also go into a living room and do this. Well, I recruited DK Metcalf. I recruited Laquan Treadwell. I recruited the Kandichi brothers. One of them was a 1st round pick. I recruited Laramie Tunstall, who was a first-round pick. When you show kids that kind of stuff, that means something, I mean, and yeah, look, Nick Saban has been the cream of the crop in college football. I think Kirby Smart's kind of taking over that reign now.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't be afraid to go against Nick Saban. I mean, you just can't. It's part of the job. I mean, you have to. Auburn and Alabama are rivals, and you can't be afraid of it. And I like how he stood up and said that. But I mean, you're talking about a guy that's well organized. He knows a lot of people. I think when he was at Ole Miss, and I'm not sure if he was doing this at Liberty or not, he would call like the first and second down plays and have his other coordinator call the third down plays, which it's interesting if you think about that, because that gives the guy calling third down plays, like, that's all he has to think about.
Mm-hmm.
Where if I'm 3rd and 4, if I'm 3rd and 7, if I'm 3rd and 8, I mean, that's an organized operation. So, and offense hadn't really been, Hugh Freeze's issue, and Liberty played good defense too while he was there.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, I think it's a good hire. I do think the portal will be, top priority. I mean, especially along the offensive line, at receiver, defensive line. I think he's got a good piece there in Robbie Ashford. I'm going to be interested to see how he works with him. Because look, Robbie Ashford got better throwing the football here down the last couple of games. I mean, that ball he threw against Alabama in the corner of the end zone on the wheel route, that was right on the money.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he really ran the ball well. He looked like he started settling in, and for a guy that did not play football for 3 years, you can't expect a kid that hadn't played college football in 3 years to come in the SEC and dominate.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a lot to ask. And I thought that Ashford was going to eventually take over the job because I know what kind of an athlete he is, but I didn't think it would be this soon. It was, that soon in the season when Finley got hurt. And of course, Calzada was out. So, but I mean, it'll be interesting to see, if Tank Bigsby comes back. I don't know if he will. I would like to see him, if he does come back. That would be him and Jacquez Hunter. That would be a nice duo. I think Jacquez Hunter is a fantastic player. So he's got some pieces to work with. But like you said, man, recruiting the state of Georgia, recruiting the Panhandle, recruiting Birmingham, Mobile areas, those Auburn's really got to start getting back into those areas.
Yeah, they do. And, it's like I said, you got a coach that's going to be he's going to be the head of it. And that's very important. The days of having a guy just, hey, you go recruit, I close, that's not going to work, because Nick Saban and Kirby Smart, Dabo Sweeney, Brian Kelly, even Jimbo. I mean, even though they weren't good, those guys are going to be in the house as the head coach. You've got I believe for you to be a successful program in college football now and college basketball too, your head coach has to be your best recruiter. It just has to be the case. So and with him, Hugh Freeze, you would expect he would be Auburn's best recruiter.
Yeah, and it's like I said, some of the past guys that he's had to go to the NFL. I mean, and they have that new facility too. It's like what he said, come see. And yeah, the head coach is the head coach for a reason. The head coach has to be the leader and the role model. And I think Hugh too, he's a very well-spoken guy, and I think he's easy to communicate with. And I think that's something that you got to have, where some coaches that's not their forte, but he even said it himself. He said, I believe in myself and my ability to recruit players. And when I'm in a living room, I can make the sell, and that's what you got to do. And I think he's that type of coach. And I mean, like I said, everywhere he's coached, he's won. So, but I really think too, keeping Cadillac and what everybody saw with Cadillac and the way he said he was going to be his right-hand man, I think that's going to really benefit him.
Yeah, it is. It is. That was the first best decision he made. So we'll see how that staff turns out too. That's going to be very intriguing too, how the entire staff is going to look like. But let's move on to the SEC championship game. Now, going into last weekend, I thought, okay, maybe LSU can upset Georgia. We'll see, because they had LSU at 5th, but then they decided to lose to Texas A&M. I put on Twitter on Saturday night, man. I said, where was this Texas A&M team all year? I mean, which Devin Achane went off
Yep.
on the LSU defense. LSU could not stop the run, which they've not been great at that this year. I thought they had been getting better, but they really had a tough time. Now, of course, this is a 3:00 kickoff over on CBS. LSU 9-3. Georgia is the number one team in the country at 12-0. Georgia, they are a 17.5-point favorite in this one. The over/under is 51. So I'm just going to lead off with this question: is there any way LSU can win this game?
I think they're going to have to, of course, they're going to have to force turnovers.
Yeah.
I mean, and LSU does have good pass rushers, so that's what they're going to have to hit Bennett and force some fumbles, maybe a scoop and score or something like that. I think LSU can score a little bit. And, coming off a loss, I mean, sometimes coming off a loss, teams get really up, and motivated. But I don't know. I've been in that stadium over there for an SEC championship game, and I know it's a home field advantage for Georgia. I mean, it just is. And I mean, and they play well there. And I think Georgia really has to play a bad game and really have like 3 or 4 turnovers for LSU to win, though. I just because, like you said, man, I mean, LSU's had trouble stopping the run all year. Kenny McIntosh, Dewan Edwards, Kendall Milton. That's the way those guys are running the football. Georgia's offensive line's, powerful. So I think it'll be a long shot, and I don't see it happening, man, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
But
no, I mean, I don't
then again,
either.
Phillip, I didn't think A&M would be.
Yeah, I know.
What do we know?
So much has happened this season that we wouldn't even never thought. I mean, we never would have thought South Carolina would beat Tennessee the way they did a few weeks ago, and then they turn around and do it again, like we said on the Open. They beat Clemson. And I look at it, you just can't run on Georgia either. That's another thing with them, and that's something that's being consistent with this team. And what they do not allow you to run the ball less than 80 yards a game, 79.5 yards a game. Rushing is what opponents do. And I mean, I know a lot of LSU's running game does come from Jaden Daniels, but LSU's going. I mean, Georgia's going to have a spy on him the entire game. I mean, they're not going to let him beat him with his feet like he did. I mean, he pretty much did against Alabama. I mean, that was a big part of that win was what he did with his legs. I think A&M did a good job. He did get some decent runs, but he didn't have those big breakaway runs like he's had in other games. And look, it's going to be up to the passing game. Kayshon Boutte and Malik Neighbors, I think they're going to have a fantastic game, but you're going to have to get the ball out quick, because if not, Carter on the defense line, he's going to get after Jaden Daniels too as well. I mean, you're right. I mean, it's going to be turnovers, and it's kind of like you're going to have to hope Georgia does not come in with their A game, which I know it feels like sometimes they sleepwalk in these games. I don't think they're going to do that here, though. I think they're going to have their full attention with LSU going into this one. So it is one of the things. You're right. It's going to be a lot of things going to happen for LSU to win this game. Georgia's going to have to help them, basically.
Yeah, and Jaden Daniels' running abilities helped LSU win a number of games. And like we talked about earlier with Georgia and Tennessee when they played, like Hendon Hooker's more of a pocket passer.
Mm-hmm.
Where Jaden's not really, he is to a degree, but he can get out and move and run. So that'll be interesting to see what they do with him there. But the key to Georgia, and look, it's pretty simple. They don't allow people to run on them.
Mm-mm.
And I rarely do you see a team run on them. But and if you can't run, it's like when Kirby was at Alabama, when Alabama was really, really playing good defense, nobody could run on them. And if you can't do that, that's when they get you. If you get second long, third and long, that's when they bring them stunts and those blitzes, and they just kind of bottle you in that pocket and have guys coming from all over the place. And I'll tell you another thing Georgia does too. They hit you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I was talking to my dad today about this. They're the one team in college football that still knocks the hell out of you. And they tackle, and they're fast, they're aggressive, they're mean. Nobody else plays defense in America like they do. Nobody.
They don't miss
Alabama
tackles.
used to. But nah, I'm not seeing it as much anymore.
Yeah, I mean, if you watch Georgia play, very, very rarely do they miss a tackle. I mean, they're
No.
very fundamental in how they tackle you. I mean, they're not looking for the highlight hit. They're just going out there, tackle, get you to the ground. So, I mean, that's another thing too. You've almost got a nickel and dime them down the field because they're more than likely they're not going to give up the big pass play down the field because one, they're usually getting after the quarterback or causing some kind of pressure. And then, like I said, they don't miss tackles. I mean, that's what's impressive about them.
Yeah, and another thing too, the NCAA limits tackling in practice.
Mm-hmm.
You can only practice, you can only hit so many times in practice because of the head injuries and all this stuff like this. So that's enough. That's what's impressive is like what they are doing during practice to practice tackling. That's the key because yeah, it's like you don't see them going in and diving at these guys go up and they wrap their arms around you and they get you to the ground. And it's usually not just one guy, it's a couple of them,
Yeah.
and that's, what that is too. That's heart and determination. And that all stems from their head coach because that's the way he played football.
Yeah, so looking at this game, so I kind of want to flip it around. The LSU defense versus the Georgia offense, and I think I think Georgia's offense is very underrated in the way people talk about them. They're actually in one of the tops in the country, but they average 38 points per game. In the SEC, wise, surprisingly they're sixth rushing in the SEC, but they're third in passing. Stetson Bennett's had a tremendous year. He's thrown over 3,000 yards, only 16 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. But I'm kind of wondering, and we mentioned LSU. Last week was weird. I mean, yes, they haven't done great against the run this year, but I felt like they were getting better. And we know about Harold Perkins, the freak that he is on that side of the ball. But I wonder too if Kirby and this offense staff, Todd Monken, you got to look at it too. Stetson Bennett's good on rollouts. I would roll away from wherever he is at because we say how much they've struggled. He is the type of player, though, Harold Perkins, that can change a football game. So, I mean, I'm going to be intrigued how, and I want to see what you think about that matchup, the Georgia offense versus LSU defense, how they game plan, how they deal with him, because he's not the only guy. You got, Ojulari, and you've got Allygate. You've got, like you said in the open, when we started talking about the game, LSU's got some guys that can get pressure on the quarterback. So how they combat that is going to be very interesting on Saturday.
Yeah, and you just can't have your right tackle or left tackle one-on-one with Perkins. He's just too quick. I mean, and so I thought Texas A&M did a pretty good job of coming down and crackbacking him on a couple of times and knocking him off balance and chipping him and stuff like that. So, and Georgia, their offense is kind of designed where they're throwing short, quick passes, almost like design runs. They're like almost like sweeps and stuff like that. So Todd Monken is done a hell of a job this year calling plays for them. And but yeah, I've always said this too. I mean, like if you have good pass rushers, it's kind of like against Auburn, Alabama last year in the Iron Bowl. Auburn's pass rushers just went off. And Auburn had a good defensive line. I mean, that really wasn't their problem, but like if Ojulari and Perkins and they start, getting to the quarterback, yeah, you LSU, could make some things happen. But I mean, I don't know. I just think Kirby Smart's too intelligent of a coach to allow those two guys to beat him.
And then my question is this for LSU defense. Let me swing it more into the Georgia offense's favor. Who's going to guard Brock Bowers?
Or Darnell Washington, who's what?
Yeah, that's another one.
James out there, 6'7", too.
Yeah.
I mean, like you got a NBA small forward out there playing tight end. I mean, and yeah, Bowers, I've said it all along. I think he's one of the best players in the country. I mean, and they use those guys in a lot of different ways, and they're also very willing blockers.
Yeah, they are. So it's going to be interesting. Look, this game could be close. LSU's got talent. I mean,
Sure.
they've got good players. We'll just see what's going to happen. And I think it all, like you said, Georgia's got to kind of help them out with that. So obviously, people listening and watching this, they can probably feel that we were both leaning Georgia on this one. But Do you have a final score prediction for the SEC championship game?
I'd probably say like 45-17, something like that.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that one. I'll probably go about 38-20 maybe.
And
Uh,
here's the thing too, Phillip. I mean, like Georgia, they pulled up in some games. There's been they could score 55 each game if they
they
want
did
to.
against Tennessee. I mean, they could have beat Tennessee worse than they did.
Yeah. I mean, so that's Kirby just plays that way sometimes. So when they want to turn it on, they can turn it on.
You know what this Georgia team reminds me of the last 2 years? They remind me of the early Alabama Nick Saban teams, where that's what he did. I mean, there was a lot of games where Alabama would beat you 24-3, but
Yeah.
it felt like they just beat you 50-3. I mean, it
Uh-huh.
just felt different. But it's like once he knows he's got the game in hand, he just runs the ball, lets the defense control the rest of the game, and that's it. I mean, when Georgia beats you down, it feels like they beat you worse than they did.
Yeah, and like that's a good point too that you make because like some of those Alabama teams, with Julio Jones and Mark Ingram, when it came to a big game, that's when they beat the hell out of you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they just beat the crap out of a team that was supposedly supposed to give them a run, and they beat them by 45 points. So when Georgia wants to turn it on, they can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see. We'll see how the game goes. I always enjoy the SEC championship game. Always ready for it. So real quickly before we get out of here, we're also going to go through some of the other conference championship games. We're not look. I don't have Conference USA championship game wrote down on this list. I do not have the MAC championship game on there. And I don't have the Mountain West. But we'll go through all the other ones. Friday night which is big, and we talked about this a little bit earlier. USC and Utah playing for the Pac-12 championship game. 7 o'clock on Fox. Like I said, it's on Friday night. USC is only a 2.5-point favorite. Of course, Utah won this game 43-42 earlier in the year. USC does have a bad defense. Utah's defense hasn't been what we usually would expect. This has got to be a high-scoring game between these two.
Sure, and I like USC in this rematch. So I like the way they're playing right now. They're playing with a lot of confidence. Caleb Williams is playing well. USC's got a good offensive line too, and so I like USC to get it done here, and I like them to make the playoffs. And then I don't know, like you said, I don't know if they have the defense, to win the national championship. I don't think they do, but I mean, it'll be interesting to see some new teams in there, and I do think they can score.
So I'm going to go with Utah.
I hear you.
I'm going to pick Utah. Well, okay. I went into the season. This was one of my picks to get to the Final Four. This was one of my playoff teams. I picked Utah to win the Pac-12 before the season started, so I'm going to continue with that. I really like Cam Rising as a quarterback. He has a grit and a guttiness about him. I mean, it's not pretty. He doesn't look like your prototype, or maybe he doesn't have the best looking passing motion. The greatest athlete, but he just gets the job done. I'm going to go with Utah. I think it's another close game. I think it's going to be a lot of fun watching this game on Friday night. But I'm going to go with Utah. Probably wrong, but I'm going to stick with my preseason Pac-12 champion on this one. And I'm
Hey
going to
man,
go.
you've been hot lately, so yeah, we'll see what happens. I mean, yeah, but you're right about Rising. He's a good athlete. I think that kid's going to be able to play in the NFL too for some.
I do
I
too.
like his moxie.
He feels like a guy that is going to have a career. He could always have career as a backup,
Yeah.
someone that you can rely on, and that's what he is at Utah right now. Jumping over on Saturday, the Big 12 championship game. Kansas State, they're 9-3. They'll be playing TCU, who is 12-0, 3 in the country right now. 11 a.m. on ABC. TCU is a 2.5-point favorite. I believe this is going to be close. Like I said in the beginning, Adrian Martinez did not play much that first time around. I think TCU is probably going to want to prove that they can beat Kansas State regardless of who is quarterback. I think TCU keeps the magic going. Close one. I think it's going to give TCU fans a heart attack like it usually does with this team. But I think TCU is going to win this one. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so too. And having the game being in Arlington, Texas is helpful to
Mm-hmm.
TCU. But I will say this. I watched Baylor run roughshod over TCU. So and that Kansas State running game of Martinez and Deuce Vaughn, who's one of my favorite players, if they're hot and they don't turn the ball over, Kansas State could easily upset these guys. And then you're going to have a scenario where you penalize TCU with one loss for playing in the championship game. So I don't know. That's be a tough call, but I'm like you. I'm gonna go with TCU right here, and I think Max Duggan is a quarterback. I think he's a guy that should get some Heisman consideration.
I do too as well. Just what he's done in
Yeah,
these close
good
games
leader,
for them. Yeah,
good leader.
absolutely.
Yep.
Very underrated runner too. I think he's
Yeah.
very underrated as a runner. So we're going to go out of the Power Five with these next two. Obviously, in this state, the Troy Trojans are hosting the Sun Belt Championship game. They will be playing Coastal Carolina, who's 9-2. Great first year by John Summerall. Going 10-2, they should be 11-1. Just knocked down a pass against Appalachian State. They would be 11-1. 2:30 on ESPN. Troy is an 8.5-point favorite. Now, the big question going into this game too is Grayson McCall. Jamie
Yeah.
Chadwell said earlier in the week that he was questionable. Him playing or not playing is huge for this one. But what do you think about the Sun Belt Championship game?
Well, the talent's been there at Troy the last couple of years. It's just now Summerall put it all together. I mean, I like Troy. I mean, I think their only other loss was at Ole Miss, and they hung in there pretty good early in the season. So, but I'm gonna go with the Trojans here, and if McCall doesn't play, I think they win it by 2 touchdowns, something like that.
It as well. But whoever plays quarterback for Coastal, and I'm picking Troy to this. I think Troy's going to win the game. You got to watch out for Carlton Marshall and just all them guys on that Troy. That Troy defense is really good. And that's the thing. I think Troy's not ranked because none of their games are pretty. I mean, they're not the most attractive looking wins, but they just win every single week. They're with their defense, and then the offense just does enough every single week, to win games. And Carlton Marshall is a great player. I'm really interested to see what happens with him going in the pros. I know when you look at, if you listen or read what some draft people say, maybe he's undersized for linebacker stuff, but he's the heart and soul of that Troy team, the Troy defense especially.
How many tackles he have this year? About 190.
Probably. I do not have the stats right in front of me, but hey, no one's had more than him in a college football career. That's one thing for sure.
No, man. I've interviewed him. He's a great kid too, man. I mean, a little heat-sinking missile, buddy.
Did you see his after one of the games this year, how beat up it was and everything? Oh, the paint was coming off his helmet. He was hitting so hard. So yeah, he's one of them guys, and kind of how he goes, how the Troy Trojans go.
Their secondary is good too, Phillip.
Mm-hmm. They're just a good all around defense. I mean, they've got guys all over the field, and I think they've got a lot of guys that are going to play in the NFL. I really do. I think they just have a really good group there. So it'd be big for Troy. Go 11-2, win the Sun Belt in Summerall's first year. Now, the AAC championship game between the Fighting Gus Malzahn's over there at UCF, they are 9-3, which I tried to blow it this past Saturday against South Florida. They will be playing Tulane, who is 10-2 on the year. This is 3:00 over on ABC. Tulane is a 4-point favorite in this one. Where are you leaning in this one?
I like Central Florida. I watched the game that UCF and Tulane played a couple of weeks ago, and Tulane could not stop them. I mean, UCF just ran right through them, and I don't know why in the hell Tulane's favored by 4 points. I'll take that 4 points all day long, and I like UCF. I mean, what 10-win season for UCF if they get there, and then they could win 11 in the bowl game for old Gus Malzahn. So that'd be quite an achievement there. And I'm telling you, man, if he just sticks to what he knows down there, and I don't know if he's going to be able to hold on to Travis Williams or not, they could make an undefeated run here in the next couple of years.
Yeah, and then next year they're going to be in the Big 12, so that's going to be different too. Well, I was trying to look up. You talk about when they played each other, because Central Florida beat them 38-31 in that one. Central Florida had on rushing, they had 336 yards rushing in the game, 132 passing. So when I was going in, so I was like, Tulane, they've had a really good year. You talked me into it, man. I'm going to go Central Florida. The Gus Malzahn is going to get that conference championship win. And look, I think Gus I ain't gonna say great. He's a really good coach. And there's a lot of Auburn fans that give him trouble for everything. Auburn, I think, which we ain't gonna get into that. But I think Gus gets him a conference championship and if he gets 11 wins, that's big. I wonder if he's gonna get one of those raises he always got at Auburn after all this.
Probably the way these ADs are, he'll probably get a a 10-year contract for like $90 million and $50 million buyout. Like these, I don't get it. But yeah, I mean, he's done a good job, which I thought he would do a good job down there. I mean, and I honestly think Gus just got out of what he knew best at Auburn, and that was the running quarterback. I really too wonder if all the Cam Newton talk about his and Gus's system not working in the NFL threw him for a loop. I just really wonder that. I mean, and he let Malik Willis go. You know, I never understood why he didn't give him a chance either.
You know, if Gus was still at Auburn, Robbie Ashford would be the perfect quarterback for him.
Yeah.
Because you remember Nick Marshall, the way he was. It was
Sure.
like after Nick Marshall, it's almost like Gus thought he had to prove a point and have a pocket passer. Because you went with Jeremy Johnson, didn't work. Then Sean White was okay. He was a solid quarterback for them, but he just stayed hurt. Jarrett Stidham, a pocket passer. He's not a runner. And I mean, Bo Nix's a little bit of a runner, but not a great runner. He's more of a throwing quarterback too as well. So you're right. He got away from the after Nick Marshall, he just got away from that style of quarterback. And obviously that's what works for him with Plumlee down there in Central Florida.
Yeah, I mean, and it blew my mind. I mean, and Sean White, I mean, he wasn't the dynamic. He wasn't a dynamic athlete like Marshall. You know, I mean, that his whole system was predicated on a running quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just the mesh point feeds, guys running all which ways. And I mean, and let's face it too, Malzahn was a Wildcat when he was at Arkansas, and then the NFL caught on to it, and he kind of revitalized college football a little bit. And like I said, it really puzzled me the way he went against what made him successful. And I just never could figure that out.
Yeah, me too. And I think about it, it's just he just completely went away from it. You're right. We got two more here, real quickly. The Big Ten championship game: Purdue at 8-4 versus Michigan, who's 12-0. 7 o'clock on Fox. Michigan is a 17-point favorite in this one. Really feels like the Big Ten championship game was played between Ohio State and Michigan. No disrespect to Purdue. Purdue's got some decent players offensively. Aiden O'Connell is a really solid quarterback there.
Yep.
But Michigan's just really too good. I think Michigan wins this thing easily, probably like maybe 31-14 or something like that.
Yeah, and I heard in the Ohio State-Michigan game, I wasn't able to really watch that game, that about the third quarter, one of their captains rallied their team around. He pointed over to the sideline and said, "Look at those guys. Now's our time to win the national championship." And that's when they went on a run. And I think Michigan smells it. I think they feel it. And sometimes, man, when you, as a team, you start getting on a roll and you start feeling what you can accomplish and everything's going good, I think it just starts steamrolling for you. And I think Michigan's going to destroy Purdue. I mean, I see them when they're winning this game, 48-10, something like that.
Yeah, it just doesn't feel like this is cool to be a bunch of contests. And then finally, the ACC championship game, which from a national standpoint, it doesn't have a lot of meaning. But look, two teams are playing for a conference title. Clemson 10-2 coming off the loss against South Carolina, and then North Carolina, who's lost 2 games in a row. They were kind of in position a few weeks ago where maybe if enough stuff followed in front of them, they could maybe got in. And you look what happened. Man, North Carolina losing to Georgia Tech, and then they lost in overtime to NC State this past week. 7 o'clock on ABC. Clemson, they are a 7.5-point favorite. I tell you what, though, next year, Matt, one of my leading candidates, one of my favorites for the Heisman is going to be Drake May. That kid is something special at quarterback. I'm going to call the upset. I say North Carolina wins this game. I think there's some stuff going on with Clemson. I don't know. And I know North Carolina's lost 2 in a row, but I really like Drake May. And I think they're going to see that, hey, Spencer Rattler had a day against this Clemson defense. Drake May, I'm sorry, he's a better quarterback than Spencer Rattler. They've got weapons on this North Carolina team. I'm going to go North Carolina. I think it's going to be a close game. Probably win it by 3 or 7 points, maybe like a 34-27, 31-27, something along those lines. So I think North Carolina wins this one.
I agree with you. And I think here down the stretch, these last couple of games, I think North Carolina's inexperience kind of got to them a little bit. They're a young team, and, they were still in the playoff hunt, and, a lot on the line. And it's like I talked about pressure and all that. But this time next year, they'll have experienced that. being in big games where you need to win. And so I'm with you. I think this. I don't know why Clemson's favored by that much. I think they, if anything, should be favored by like a field goal. But I'm with you. I think North Carolina pulls the upset behind May. Man, he is a player. And the first game I watched, that North Carolina Appalachian State game early in the season, and I was like, who is this dude?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, he was dropping dimes, man. And they're like, yeah, this is a true freshman. I'm like, wow. Whew.
He's better than Sam Howell. He's better than what Sam Howell was.
Yeah. He's just throws a great ball. He moves around well, and he's a leader too. You can tell he's the guys really respect him.
Yeah, so it's going to be an interesting championship weekend. I always look forward to this week. It's always fun, and then it's the end of the regular season. We wait for some bowls, the Heisman. We'll find out who's going to be the playoff teams on Sunday. So it'll be interesting. And I want to say this too, Matt. Of course, this is not the last time you'll be on. We'll get together, probably once or twice before the season is completely over. But this is the last of our weekly picks doing this each week. I like to say I appreciate you coming on. We record this usually on Wednesdays. I appreciate you coming on and doing this every week. But also, if the listeners, viewers want to check out, where can they find you? What's going over on lowdownsports.com and what you're doing over at Field Level Media?
Yeah, man, I'm going to have my playoff picks up this week over at lowdownsports.com. And, yeah, Field Level Media, I'm covering Auburn basketball, a little bit of Bama basketball. Cover some Falcon stuff over there, so check them out. They're also on CBSSports.com, their content, and Yahoo Sports, so you can find those places there. But go to CBS Sports to check out my stuff there, my preview stuff for Auburn basketball. And I'm doing a Bama game this weekend too, so on there at phillevelmedia.com.
All right, sounds good, Matt. Once again, appreciate you doing this every week. We talked about it off air, guys. We're probably going to do some kind of bowl prediction show or something like that. So pay attention in the next few weeks for that. But Matt, appreciate the time, and I look forward to talking again since I'm down the road.
You too, buddy. And next year we're going to keep our record in the SEC picks.
There we go. We're going to do the full season. We only did half season this time. But
that's right. That's right, bud.
But anyways, again, thank you, Matt.
All right. Talk to you soon.